Joining me now, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. Secretary, you know, it's not the wisest thing to reason your way through politics based on how people you don't like think about things. But I will say that Donald Trump hates this deal, which makes me inclined towards favoring it, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce loves it, which makes me very skeptical of it. How should I think about it, and how do you think about it?
Well, I'd say what's remarkable is you have the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO saying the same thing. You know, one really exciting thing about this bill is that you have all these strange bedfellows coming together because it's so clear that we need to do it. Business and labor, Democrats and Republicans, okay, maybe not the former president, but so many people across the spectrum and across the country know that we need to make this happen. We've been talking about infrastructure deals in Washington for years and years, and now we have an opportunity to make it happen, not just a run-of-the-mill infrastructure bill, but something that I think will be a generational investment and a historic opportunity on job creation, on climate, and a lot of other things at stake in how we set up our transportation for the future.
I want to talk about some of the climate aspects, which are or not included. But first, just this question. Here's some of the, just so people have a sense of some of the top lines here. And again, we're going to dig into this. And these top lines are just these sort of numbers. But you've got roads and bridges, power infrastructure and clean energy, rail and Amtrak, modernizing transport. You've got electric vehicle chargers. One thing I keep thinking about when we're talking about roads and bridges, major projects and ports and things like that, like, are these going to be built with an eye towards what the climate of the next 25 years looks like? Because it really seems like that is crucial, not just that we modernize and get away from fossil fuels, but the things that we're building are climate resilient for a world that is getting much hotter and much wetter.
That's exactly right. We've got to build resilient infrastructure. Yes, we're working to make sure that climate change is stopped from getting any worse than it is, but it's already upon us. You know, in Portland, during these shocking triple-digit temperatures they saw in the heat wave there, they had to shut their transit system down because the cables were in danger of literally melting. In New York, the Hudson River tunnels, part of why they're in such rough shape has to do with seawater penetration during Superstorm Sandy, and we know that there's more where this came from. That's why you're seeing 50+ billion identified for dealing with things like droughts and fires and floods. And we're going to expect, certainly as a department, to the extent that that we are shaping the dollars that Congress is hopefully about to pass, we're going to be expecting that communities and grant applicants demonstrate that they get that the way something should be designed for the future isn't going to be the same as the past. If you keep putting a road back that's getting washed out year after year, maybe it needs to be built in a different way.
So I want to play for you something that you had to say about climate change in 2019 and then ask you about some of the climate elements here. Take a listen to your own words.
We have lived this in my industrial Midwestern hometown. My generation has lived this as long as we have been alive, and it's only accelerating. Science tells us we have 12 years before we reach the horizon of catastrophe when it comes to our climate.
Now, there are some climate provisions in this legislation, but if you look at the White House's initial proposal, right, a lot of things the White House really cares about, clean energy standard being one of them, very, very important. We're very focused on this show, are not in this bill. What should we make of that? Are those priorities being abandoned?
Not at all, no. And this is only one part of the administration's policy. Obviously, we have the budget resolution, the reconciliation framework coming up, and a lot more work to do on things like the clean energy standard and other pieces of tax policy that matter. You know, you show that clip, and that's probably a year or two old. So it's more like 10 years now, if we're lucky. And again, some of the worst effects of climate change are already happening right now. I guess what I would emphasize in this bill, even though it's not maybe considered the climate bill, is that every transportation decision is also a climate decision, whether we call it that or not, because transportation is the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases in the U.S. economy. That's why when we're creating the biggest investment in public transit in the history of public transit federally, that's also a climate decision. When we're talking about the kinds of investments that we'll make on ports and making it easier to move goods over water, which is more climate friendly, that's a climate decision. When we're investing in electric vehicle charging infrastructure, school buses, helping transit agencies acquire zero-emission electric buses. All of these things are part, but only part, of the answer when it comes to making sure that we meet the very aggressive goals that the president set out when it comes to our climate. And, this is one of the reasons why I think it's important to understand that this bill is not like the 2009 stimulus package, which did a lot of really important and good work in transportation, but that was about dealing with the economic crisis of that moment. This is about preparing this bill for the future. Part of it's about jobs that will be created almost overnight, but this is about a vision that will make sense in the 2030s, 40s, and 50s as well.